My name is Bob Bazans, and I'm an alcoholic. Through the grace of God and the help of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have not found it necessary to take a drink since the 10th of December, 1967, and for that I'm very grateful. This is a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here. There are so many people in this room who are close to me and part of my life. It feels familiar, it feels warm, it feels supportive, and I bask in that, and I appreciate it. I thank the committee, thank Jay and Bob and Jimmy and anybody else who went through the effort of going through this. When I was first putting together conferences, when I was pretty active in helping develop a couple of conferences, it was always chaos behind the curtain. We knew all the things that were going wrong, and we thought that they were so important, and almost no one in the audience knew that there was anything going wrong. So most of what we thought was so crucial, people didn't even know what was going on. So there was kind of two perspectives on that. My perspective of your conference has been one of enjoying it very much, and I congratulate you on what you're doing. I enjoyed hearing Thomas. I always enjoy when I'm with Tom. Tom is one of the pleasures of being able to shoot your mouth off as you get around is you also get the privilege of meeting other active members of Alcoholics Anonymous. So one of the reasons I keep doing this is because it enhances my program. Makes me a little bit more willing. All of us, after we spend a weekend like this, I'll go home and I'll be more willing to practice my program when I go home than if I were not here. There's something cumulative that happens to us in a setting like this. It happens to me, and it's my experience that it happens to us. And Tom Ivester is a guy that I met, 2, 3, 4 years ago, and he has been a man who I respect and I enjoy. I just like being around you and who you are and what your program. So I enjoyed your sharing. Jerry is one of my best friends. So that's just any time I can be with Jerry is just fine with me, and enjoy what he has to do. Marianne, I had not heard before. I really think you gave a hell of a talk. I really very much enjoyed your message. That's going to be a tape I'll take home and share a lot. Beverly's been a guest in our home, and she and Buddy are good friends, and of course that just goes without saying that I enjoy being with them. And O'Sullivan I've not been with for a while. Tom, when I met Tom pretty early on in my sobriety, and he was the big deal, and he still is a big deal to me, and I enjoy his experience and his sharing. And Clancy, I kind of have the best of both worlds. I get to hear Clancy and then not be intimidated by his being here this morning. He's a man I respect a lot, and I think I heard one of the great AA talks I've ever heard last night. And he's on his way this morning to be the surprise speaker tonight at a fellow's 25th anniversary in Pittsburgh. So he's in order to make that connection, that's what he had to do. So he's not here this morning. But that was a great talk last night. Great talk. And for all my other friends, for my sponsees and my wife and my son and my friends, I salute you and greet you, and I'm going to give an AA talk. I took my first drink of alcohol when I was 13 years old, and it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal for me because I was 4'11", I weighed 95 pounds, I was the second smallest kid in my class. As far back as I can remember, I never liked who or what I was. I always wanted to be something different. Wanted to be bigger, better looking, wanted to be an athlete. I kept trying out for football. I had a back problem. I had a yellow streak down the back of it. And I wanted to belong. I wanted to be part of. No matter, there's always seems to be a group of people who seem to know more about the business of living, who are kind of the in-group. They just seem to belong. They kind of get to each other, and everything they do just seems to be easier. They get along with dating easier. They get along with sports easier. They're elected class officers, and it's like they know something about the business of living that I don't know, like it's a mystery. So I very purposely set out, if it was possible, to try to be part of that group. Pretend like I knew what was going on, and if I spent enough time with them, that sooner or later in some conversation, if I pretended like I knew what was going on, I could overhear what their secrets were. And once I knew what the secrets were, living my life wouldn't be so difficult, because all I needed was a couple of tips. I thought it'd make it a lot easier. So I started to be what I thought I'd have to be part of the in-group. And I got to be a marginal member of the in-group, which is, that's felt like an accomplishment, except even after I was there, I didn't feel like I really belonged. I felt I was there because I was being what they wanted me to be. And if I ever stopped pretending to be what they wanted me to be, they wouldn't want me anymore. One night we were out at a party, and a friend of mine had a fifth, and we went out and we split that fifth of whiskey, and I made a discovery. The discovery was when I put alcohol inside of Barbizon's, I got a feeling of comfort and well-being, the likes of which I'd never experienced up until the time I took a drink of alcohol. It was really magical, and everybody has described that in their own way this weekend. It just transformed the way I viewed those people and the way I viewed myself within that group. From that moment on, I didn't feel like I was a member of the group. I felt like I owned it. It literally just kind of transformed your relationship with people, and it was just great. I felt funnier, I felt brighter, I felt more part of, and, I just belonged. And from that moment on, I became a social drinker. Anytime anybody else said, I'll have a drink, I just said, so shall I. I just never passed up an opportunity to do it. When you do a lot of drinking and you're underage, you get into a lot of trouble, and I got into a lot of trouble drinking. And by the time I finished high school, my drinking problem, in quotes, was the largest subject of negative conversation in my home. I come from a really neat home. I'm one of 7 kids. I've got a great mom and dad. No particular reason why I should have been a drunk other than we have a pretty good genetic string in our family. And if there's anything about inheritance in this disease, I sure had that working for me. I didn't think I had a drinking problem. I thought I had an authority problem. When you're underage and you drink, it didn't make any difference if you were caught by my father or by the police. They never cared how much you drank. They just cared if you drank. It didn't care if you had 1 drink or if you had 42 drinks. So I never wanted to get caught with 1 drink. That never made much sense to me. If I was going to get in trouble, at least I wanted to have had a decent time. And I had it figured out that if I could get some place where I wasn't treated like an adult, I was allowed to drink, and I wasn't just forbade to drink, my drinking would become normal, and I had a chance to go away to school, and a large part of how I made the decision to go away to school was based on that. Had my drinking normalized, I guess I wouldn't be your speaker here this morning. I went away, and make a long story short, I drank my way out of the University of Notre Dame in the middle of my senior year. One day I just walked out. A whole bunch of things have to happen to kind of a status-conscious young guy to go someplace as important as that was, kind of an enhancement of who I was, and donate that to the process of alcoholism. And that's what I did. I just flat donated, whatever that opportunity was. And there were a lot of kind of spectacular things that happened to me in that process, some kind of scary things and some kind of humorous things. A couple of years ago, you get a chance, like Clancy talks about, you get a chance to kind of go back and revisit the scene of the crime a little bit. I was asked to go down to Notre Dame and give an AA talk, not for the college or the university, but for some air group in Michigan or Indiana, and I went down there, and I hadn't really been back since I graduated, and that place, there's always been kind of unfinished business about that, so for a long time people would ask me, as if they really cared, where did you go to school? As if that's an important question, but I never knew how to answer it. One of those major incompletions, one of those sense of failure, and I went down there, and there's a lot of bad memories in that place, and I tried to make amends to a priest who is now very advanced in age, and he didn't remember me. This is the guy that in my mind that I had caused all this trouble to, and just this major thing, and he didn't know who the hell I was, which I thought was wonderful. I wish the rest of my list of amends went like that. And in the middle of my talk, as I'm down there talking, I said, I've always had a deep sense of failure about this place, and I said, I finally have figured out why. I said, I think it's because I failed. It took me about 16 years to figure that out. So some of the insights we're going to be sharing this morning may not be much deeper than that. But in the middle of my senior year, I just couldn't. I was in civil engineering carrying 25 credits, and I was going to school about 1 day out of 10, and I just couldn't keep the charade going anymore. It's kind of tough to bluff your way through a thermodynamics exam. It just, somehow it just couldn't make it. And I just left. I was due to be commissioned that June as an officer, and I had to get a medical release or would have been drafted. And the medical release I got was for chronic alcoholism. I'd been under psychiatric care for a couple of years, and I got a medical release for alcoholism, and I showed up back at home to a set of very disappointed parents, and I finished school at a local college in St. Paul. And when I finished school, the family asked me to leave home. They just said, you got to go. We love you, we care about you, but this is not working. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't working, and they said, you're a horrible example to the rest of the kids in the family, and we don't have any hold over you anymore, and, you got to go. And armed with my college degree and my freedom, I struck out to make my mark in the world, and I took a position as a carry-out boy in a liquor store. I had that job, you know, I don't know how long I had that job, 3 or 4 months, I guess. I lost the job for going 80 miles an hour with the delivery truck and getting a ticket, and I almost killed a little girl one day backing out of a driveway drunk. I mean, just everything about me in those days was just a little tacky. I had to go back many years later and make an amend. I used to steal booze out of that job. They often wondered because I wasn't a great employee, but I used to stock. Everybody else wanted to deliver but not stock, and they often always wondered why I was stocking. And we'd go down there and we'd fill all the shelves, and then we'd send up the empty boxes on the conveyor belt, and we'd throw them out in the alley. Every third box I threw out in the alley had a fifth in it. I'd stack them up like they were empty boxes, and then I'd come back at midnight and take the fifths out of the boxes, that I had out there. And I lost that job and took a job as a waiter at a private club in Minneapolis, and I'm living, if not on Skid Row, next to Skid Row, $2 a night hotel rooms, and I'm there, and this is really the trough of my alcoholism. I don't really have a place to live. I've got my clothes in a paper bag in a locker over there where I'm a waiter. My day is considered of getting up about 10 o'clock in the morning, taking a couple of Dexedrine, drinking a six-pack of beer, and going to work. And I'd work as a waiter from about 11 to 2. And at 2, I'd go drink beer at a bar, and at 5, I'd go buy a fifth of Southern Comfort, and I'd put it in my locker, pour it into a half-pint bottle, and suck on that all night. And then about 11 o'clock when I was done, I had to go find a place to live. So I was sharing rooms with some of the waitresses and some of the waiters. And at the end of that, we had a waiter who was a heroin addict, and his wife was a prostitute, and she and I used to share the cost of a room. Whenever she had a customer, I used to have to go walk around, and when she was done, I got the room. So, things were not going very well. This was not exactly, I had a plan, and this was not on the plan. And one night in the midst of a blackout and a pretty heavy end of a pretty long run of drinking, and I ended up at a party, and I got the hell knocked out of me. And I got it beat up badly enough that they wouldn't let me back on the floor looking the way I looked. My face was, kicked in pretty good. And I lost a job, and I had no place to go. And when you have no place to go, you go back home. I went back home, and I said, hey, can I come back? And they said, yeah, you can come back. But there's 8 other people in this family, and you've got to follow certain rules if you're going to come back in our house. And like a good little drunk, I promised to follow the rules, and they let me back in the house. And alcoholism meant a lot of different things to me in my life, but maybe what it meant more than anything else is about every 6 months I had to start my life over. And I was always starting over. And each time I was, I really didn't want my life. Alcoholism looks so voluntary. It really looks as if we're having it happen the way we intend for it to happen. Because, if people are telling us what to do, we're not doing that. So it very much looks like what we're choosing to do, as if we really had, free will, and we are making choices. And then we have the results, and it looks as if we're getting exactly what we want. If you would have put my father in a room and said, write down on a piece of paper everything you want for Bob in life, and put me in a room and said, Rob, write down everything you want for you in life, those two lists would have looked very similar. You couldn't have convinced anybody who knew me or my family that what I wanted in life was very similar to what the people who cared about me wanted for me in life. It looked like I wanted the diametrically opposite, thing. And I didn't. I wanted what they wanted for me. I just didn't know how to get it. I kept going back and trying to have that happen, and the wheels kept coming off it. So about every 6 months, I had to put the package back together and get it online and get it going. And it occurred to me that if I could put certain things into my life, I could order my life. If I found a woman that I loved and she loved me and we got married, that would give me a structure to succeed in because I wasn't a self-starter. Decided if I could get a job that was really a career sort of thing, that would make a difference. And I decided if I could get out of the house, which was interesting because I was just moving back in the house, that would make a difference. I didn't like being the family problem. I literally many nights cried myself to sleep listening to my parents fight about what to do with me. I was the family problem. Twice a year I got brought in by the police or someone and after a car accident or after being arrested or some sort of thing, and my mother's hysterical and my sisters are crying and my brothers want to beat the hell out of me and my father's trying to calm things down and they're having a discussion about what to do with me. And that would happen. That's painful. I really cared about my family, and I was very destructive within my family, and at that point in time didn't seem like I had much options. I just wasn't functioning very well. So I started to put the things in my life I thought would order my life. I got back together with Linda, who I'd gone with for a couple of years and broken up with for quite some time, and then we became engaged to be married, and today she's my very lovely wife, and she's with me this weekend, which is nice. We aren't always able to do this. Most of the time, or a lot of the time, she's managing our home so that I can be here doing this, kind of a joint effort. And she's a very active member of Al-Anon. And I know that most of you, once you sobered up, never had any difficulties, but I had some lingering difficulties in my sobriety. And I don't think we'd be married today. That's a guess. I don't know how accurate that is, but I think it's a good guess. If we both didn't have a program which to focus on and take some of the heat off as we grew up in our marriage and our relationship, and that's been a very important part. Each of us having a program has been a very important and beneficial part. So I got back together with Linda. We became engaged, we married. I got a job as an executive trainee with a manufacturing concern about my first automobile. And I thought, hey, it's finally going to happen. You're finally going to become what you always wanted to be when you grew up. Only it didn't happen because I continued to drink and have difficulties. And I was out of control by this time. I just, couldn't hang it together. I'd be, out late at night, and big corporations, want you to be at work in the morning. They like you have to come in on Mondays and stay on Fridays, and they've got a whole bunch of damn rules, and they don't work very good for alcoholics. And I'm kind of falling apart, and hung over badly most of the time, sleeping my hangovers off, and having them, hiding in dark rooms and hiding in bathrooms and having them trying to track me down. After 6 months on that job, I quit. I just, I had a sense that I was going to be fired. I left, and I took a job selling business equipment, thought I'd have more freedom as a salesman, and I had that job about 8 weeks, and I went on a 4-day drunk, the first 2 days of which I called in, the next 2 days of which I did not. And I woke up in a friend's apartment one afternoon after about a lengthy blackout, and I felt horrible, didn't know if I had a job, a fiance, or a place to live. And all of a sudden the recommendations of my father and my psychiatrist that I look into Alcoholics Anonymous didn't seem so impossible to me. And I picked up the telephone and I asked the operator for the number of AA, and she gave it to me, and I called it, and I got the Automobile Club. I really did get the Automobile Club. The lady at the Automobile Club gave me the number of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got Stu, an old-timer down at Central Office. And I said, my name is Bob, and I think I may have a drinking problem. And he talked to me for about a half hour on the telephone. And at the end of that, he got on another line, called a couple of fellows, came back on, and said, could you meet 2 guys in a cafe in about 45 minutes? And he described the men, and I allowed us how I could. And I called into work and found out that I had a job. Called Linda at work and found out I had a fiance, and called home and found out they were concerned, and concerned is always better than mad. And I thought, why did you call Alcoholics Anonymous? That's really an overreaction. You're not an alcoholic. You're just feeling guilty. You always feel guilty when you get up. You're too young to be an alcoholic. And but maybe the first evidence of some sort of grace in the program entered my life. I had made a promise to a stranger to go meet 2 other strangers, and I felt an obligation to go. I had made promises to people who mean a lot in my life and broken them regularly, and here some guy I'd never even met on the telephone. I don't even think he had my last name, but I feel a responsibility to go. And I went and I met these 2 guys. The other reason I went is I wanted to see what an alcoholic looked like. Denial helped me a little bit. All minority groups look alike. I thought maybe if I saw an alcoholic, I'd come away with a better idea as to why I wasn't one, I thought that would help me. I'd go just kind of see what they're like, see what they look like, see how old they are, see what shape they are, kind of confident that they'd be quite a bit different than I was. And I went there and I met these 2 fellas. I thought I could handle myself. If you wanted to sit me down and talk to me about my alcoholism, you also had to be willing to do 1 or 2 things. You had to be willing to discuss the rottenest thing that I knew about you. Or you had to be willing to wade through as much anger as I could put out. And the idea was, you can come and get me, but it ain't going to be for free. And as a result, not too many people had heart-to-heart chats with me about my alcoholism. But these 2 men didn't talk to me about me. They knew how to make a 12-step call. They talked to me about themselves. Sat me down in a booth, and they told me what the drinking had been like, what had happened to them, how they got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and what it was like today. There's a power in that is enormous. Clancy talked about it last night, the power of communication, one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic, and the identification that happens due to the feelings and the experiences in our lives. Very powerful. We have a tradition of sharing like that behind these microphones. We aren't very interested in what each other thinks. We are very interested in who we are. And when we share ourselves through our experience, that works. When we get beyond our experience into our ideas, it doesn't work. There is no power in it. And these two men, I did it so well within the scope of their own experience that I could have gotten up out of that booth and said, I don't want what you're recommending that I have. But I could not have gotten up out of that booth without knowing that what they shared with me just was so for them. I mean, they didn't have any business. They just were sharing themselves. I mean, it just was what happened to them. Very effective and very powerful. And it was a long time before I really was to realize the power of that. Because for a long time when I went out in 12-step calls, I didn't carry my experience. When you're young in the program, you tend to want to carry your ideas. And I carried my ideas for a long time, and it wasn't very effective. Now I've come to know that my message is my experience, and I carry that, and it has whatever effect it has. It's helped maintain my sobriety, and from time to time it's been of assistance or value to someone to make a call on. And when they finished, they asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting, and I said I did, and that night I was allowed the privilege to go to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was to make 2 discoveries which were to change my life. Now before I share those discoveries with you, I want to share with you who I was when I walked in the front door. And I used to get asked all the questions that people get asked by those who love us and care about us, that are concerned about us, and very confused with what's going on in our life. I used to get asked questions like, Bob, why do you drink the way you drink? I never had a very good answer for that. But what went on in my mind was something like this. I said, I drink because I have problems. I don't have problems because I drink. If you knew how many times I started out to have it all work out okay, and kind of the wheels just kind of came off it. You know, I mean, just if I could just pick my batting average up about 5 points, as soon as I get rid of these problems, I'm not going to have a drinking problem, so why don't we just talk about something else? Now, that was very much my attitude. I was lodged between a sister who did graduate work at the Sorbonne in Paris and a brother who was Phi Beta Kappa in law school, and when you're lodged between 2 show-offs like that, you don't look so good. And I used to get asked, you know, wouldn't you like to be like someone else? And I say, yes, I would like to be like someone else. Where are the directions? Where are the directions? How do you do that? You know, as bad as this is, as much as it doesn't work, this is all I have. I mean, everybody talked to me as if I had this reserve that I wasn't using. You know, when you're young, they talk to you about potential. You know, I mean, they're saying, God, if you ever put it together. I mean, I had it together. I just stepped in it. I mean, that was, I had it. I mean, it was there. Everything I had was right there. There was no reserve there. But, and I mean, it got to be scary. It got to be better. I mean, I liked it when they assumed that if I ever put it together, I'd be something. But it was better to be able to drink and have them assume I'd be something if I didn't drink than to not drink and not be what I thought I'd have to be if I ever sobered up. I mean, it really got to, over a period of time, to be as intimidating to me to take away my excuse for participation and put it on the line and not have it. And I didn't know how to be like other people. I didn't know how to put that together. And could you give me a cup of coffee? Okay. And they also came to me and they said, Bob's a hell of a guy if he just wouldn't drink. Now, what I got was a very clear impression that what was wrong with me was swallowing bourbon. And if I ever stopped swallowing bourbon, my life would be okay. Well, like a lot of alcoholics, I'd have a chance from time to time not to drink. Just before I went back to my senior year at Notre Dame, I went out and I had a bad night. I would have bad nights 2 or 3 times of the year, really bad nights. This bad night, I was beaten up and I was robbed and I was rolled and I was pistol whipped and I was shot at and I was thrown out of the 2nd story of a building and I ended up in a state of shock in an alley. And it's a long story, but the family came and found me. I was in a phone booth and I passed out down below the painted part, so when they went driving around looking for me, they couldn't find me. And some bum finally pointed me out and they took me to the hospital. My regular doctor didn't come, my psychiatrist came. Well, my regular doctor came past up, but my psychiatrist also came, and they were going to not let me go back to school. They were going to keep me in the psychiatric ward and treat me. If any of you enjoy my talk here this afternoon, you should have heard the one I gave 24 years ago to get out of the psych ward at Miller Hospital. I mean, it was one of the best talks under stress I've ever given. And they let me out of that hospital, let me go back to school on the condition that I wouldn't drink, and I went back and I didn't drink for, I think, 3 months. And my life didn't instantaneously get better. I didn't all of a sudden become what I thought you were telling me I'd become if I just wouldn't drink. I didn't become an A student. I didn't become a model guy. I didn't become this perfect person who was all of a sudden like his problem was gone, you know. Drinking was my solution. Okay, drinking worked very well for me. Okay? I mean, it wasn't my problem, it was my answer. I mean, they kept saying to me, if Bob wouldn't drink, he'd be all right. I mean, they just didn't understand what was going on with me. That was not so. Okay? I just stopped drinking. So I was a daily drinker, quit drinking, so I could prove to you that number one, I could quit drinking anytime I wanted to. And number two, if what was wrong with me was drinking just went away and my life didn't get better, so that isn't what's wrong. That's my answer, not my problem. They come to me and they say, Bob, I think you're an alcoholic. And I say, well, I can see with the information you have about me why you think I'm an alcoholic. There's a lot of information about me you're missing. There's a lot of information about me that you don't have. There's problems I've had before I ever took a drink of alcohol. There's problems I've had during my drinking career, but sober, cold stone sober. Some of the worst thinking, some of the worst behavior, some of the worst issues, some of the worst problems I've had were cold stone sober that had nothing at all to do with swallowing bourbon. And I think if you knew about all those dark crevices of my life, those little, you wouldn't think I was just an alcoholic. So thanks a lot for your concern. Why don't you just get off my back? Now, the very best of my ability, thank you. That's how I remember presenting myself to you. I was 23 years old. I was scared stiff. I didn't know whether to call you by your first names or your last names when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought you were going to give me a test. I guess that was because I was a student. I mean, and I was so used to being put in front of authoritative people who were, I was often in front of policemen, in front of judges, in front of attorneys, in front of doctors, in front of psychiatrists, in front of my parents, and I was almost always having someone sitting me down, talking to me about what was going on in my life and asking me why. And I showed up to Alcoholics. When I showed up to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I ran into a group of people who knew more about me without knowing me than I ever run into in my life. It was like a mystery. I mean, it was intriguing to me that you knew that much about me without knowing me. Because, I really thought I was very special. And I was to make two discoveries that were to change my life, and the discoveries were these. Number one, that alcoholism was a disease. And you say, well, everybody knows alcoholism is a disease. Well, I didn't. I thought alcoholism was something that happened to you when you were a lot older and a whole lot sloppier, and you had problem functioning because you're just physically drunk all the time. That didn't seem to describe me. It described me fairly well, but it didn't seem to describe me. But I was told that alcoholism was a disease that affected me as a total person, that it was physical, but it was also mental and spiritual. That once you crossed the line from problem drinking into alcoholism, your alcoholism affected you all the time, when you were drinking and when you were not drinking. And God, that was important to me to know. I just couldn't connect the chaos of my life with physically swallowing bourbon. I just couldn't make that connection. I remember an old-timer told me, he said, Bob, you don't have a drinking problem. And I said, could you put that in writing? And he said, no, smart aleck. He said, you have a drinking problem, but if that's all you had was a drinking problem, all you'd have to do is quit. Have you ever quit? And I said, yeah, I've quit. He said, did it work? I said, no, it didn't work. He said, I didn't think so. What's wrong with us is alcoholism. The symptom of alcoholism is a drinking problem. But alcoholism is, physical, but mental and spiritual. When we do in Alcoholics Anonymous to treat our alcoholism, is we use the 12 recovery steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous to treat the mental and spiritual aspects of the disease to find a different way to live. A different way to live that's sufficiently better than the way we lived before so that we don't have to go back to drugs or booze to do something for us that we're unwilling or unable to do for ourselves. And if we don't find another way to live, we're going to go back to drinking because you don't know how to live without drinking. And that was one of the truer things I've ever been told in my life. Not only did I not know how to live, I did not know how to live without drinking. The other discovery I made in those meetings is that there was an awful lot of people who had drunk an awful lot of booze and taken a lot of other chemicals, and now they weren't doing it. And the only observable reason for them not drinking is they like what they found in sobriety better than what they found in a bottle. It had occurred to me that I might have to quit, but I thought my life was over. I didn't want to give, we come in here like we're giving up our freedom, like we're giving up our friends, like we're giving up some sort of treasure, like we're cool. There was, my life was tacky. There hadn't been anything cool in my life in so long. It was just tacky. Really tacky. But I had this, I didn't want him to take it away from me. And I listened to you in your meetings, I listened to you share your lives, and your lives were not over. It was clear to me. There was a vitality, there was a zest, there was a joy, and I wanted to find out what that was, and because I've been able to walk with you over the years, I've been able to find that out. Recovery is every bit the adventure and as progressive as the disease is. Thank God. And recovery is different than I ever expected it to be. I really thought, someone said, describe recovery. When I first came in, I thought recovery was abstinence. When I heard people talk about sobriety was abstinence. That was just, I equated those two. It was to be some time before I really got the full distinctions between sobriety and abstinence. I just didn't get it when I first came in. So I got it that a lot of people have been sober a hell of a long time. I was impressed by that, but I thought that was quantity. I really didn't understand when people talked about their program. It was to be, I don't know how long it was, but it was almost a couple of years, year and a half, before I really had a sense of a program. And you fed that to me and you taught that to me a little tiny bit at a time over a period of time. The first change that happened in my life had to do, drinking robbed me of the little bit extra that it took to be a success in any area of my life. It kind of took the hop off my fastball. It just kind of slowed me down, and I wasn't doing enough to get by. And then when I started not to do enough to get by, I used to instinctively lie and cover up. I used to build an alibi system. Clancy talked about that defense mechanism, and I built a wall up between you and me so that you couldn't see the unattractive, unworkable parts of my life. And the thinking that went on behind the wall went something like this. It said, you like me, but you only like what I let you see about me. But if you could see everything about me, all the dark, dirty, lousy, insufficient, unattractive things about me, you'd hate me, because I hate me. And who knows more what a lousy, insufficient person I am than me. And I was walking around comparing my inside with your outside. The only way you come out doing that is second best. But at some time in my life, I got sick enough and tired enough and hurt enough and afraid enough behind that wall that I started to tear that wall down, and I said, hey, come and get me. I don't care who you are or where you come from, but just come and get me and help me not be who I am anymore. I can't stand it 5 more minutes. And for the first time in my life, I shared the whole deck of cards with someone. See, up until that time, no one knew about me. You knew pieces about me, and I would kill you with the piece you didn't have. You'd come to me and you'd say, Bob, this is what's wrong. This is what you ought to do. And in my mind, I'd say, yeah, but, you have 5% of the information. There's this whole other thing over here you know nothing about. And if you knew about that, you wouldn't be advising me the way you're advised. You don't even know who I am. And I could just neutralize you with what you didn't know about me. So, I was getting to a point where not only was I unique, I was almost terminally unique. There was no one, what I was looking for in life, really looking for, and kept being discouraged by when I go talk to anybody who tried to help me, I was looking for someone who was an expert on me. Someone who knew me so well that I couldn't neutralize me. Now, the only person who knew me that well was me, and I was sicker in hell. That was the only person who knew me well enough that I couldn't neutralize like that. Now, I came in, my life, my wife had part of it, my employer had part of it, my family had part of it, my friends had part of it, but no one had all of it. And I was able to stay unique. But at some point in time when I tore that wall down, that process of tearing my wall down started when I called Alcoholics Anonymous. It continued in meetings. It continued in discussions with my sponsor. And I completed it when I took my fifth step. And for the first time in my life, when I shared my whole life with someone, I made a discovery. And the discovery was that I'm not unique. My personality may be unique, but not my illness, not my behavior, not my problem. And for the first time in my life, I started to have a sense of hope that maybe a solution that wasn't unique, maybe a solution that operated in your life could operate in mine. Because the fear I had is what you didn't know about me, is I was a great starter, and I never finished anything. Okay? Form above substance. I was the guy, if we were having a mile race, I was the guy who'd show up and I'd have the cute little tights on, I'd have a nice little t-shirt, great pair of tennis shoes. I'd look like a jock. I would talk like a jock. I would be a person who would have an effective enough conversation that you would know that I was a guy who you should watch that might do pretty damn well in the race and might even win the race. Okay? Now, sometime during that race, when that race took off, I'd pull up and hold my leg. And you'd say, that's really tough. Why would a guy who sounds that good, with that much experience, with that much opportunity, and that likely to win the race? He was in the front the first, block and a half or 2 blocks. It's obvious that there's something had to happen to a guy like that not to finish, because, there was a hell of an opportunity there. Okay. Now, what you didn't know about me is if you got in a helicopter and followed me around through my life, that's what always happened. I just looked good. I just started good. I never finished because I was different. And I was in a family that seemingly worked for the other people in my family, didn't work for me. I was in a faith
that seemingly worked for everybody else around me and didn't work for me. I was at a school that seemingly worked for the people who were in that structure and in that school and didn't work for me. I was, 14 of us went down from my high school. I had the highest grade point average. Most of them had to go to summer school before they started there. I was the only one who didn't finish. Okay? So I am the guy who starts great and doesn't finish. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you see, I was very similar to you, but not quite. I was different. And I would sit in those meetings, and I would listen to you, and what I didn't know is I was so self-involved. Your problems, you didn't seem to have the issues and problems I had. You didn't have the issues and problems because I was so obsessed with myself, I couldn't see you. I mean, I just didn't see you. You were in those meetings, sharing your life, sharing your problems, but if the circumstances of your life were better than mine, you didn't have a problem. I mean, but just if I would trade with you, I mean, you didn't have a problem. I mean, okay? So I think what's happening in my life is unique. And if I had maintained that, I wouldn't have been able to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous because I would not have believed. I would have believed that it's helpful, it works for you, I know it works for you, but I'm different. And the experience in the fifth step, once I took my fifth step, and I can't separate it from the first step. My identity became an alcoholic. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous looking for an expert in Bob. And I surrendered, and when I surrendered, I became an alcoholic. And all of a sudden, I had a lot of people who could teach me about being an alcoholic and about getting well from alcoholism. And I had teachers. I had a period of time where I was as teachable as I have ever been in my life in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I would ask a question, and I got an answer. And I made significant progress and growth during the first year of my sobriety. And then there got to be a time where my ego started to reassert itself, and I asked a question, I got an answer, and I wasn't sure you were right. And I started to question what was going on around me. And I started to have issues. I had other things that were going on in my life that did not seem to relate to my alcoholism. Even though I heard those words when I came in, they told me it was mental and spiritual as well as physical. I didn't have a full appreciation of that. I'd still have a growing appreciation for how true that is. But I had other issues in my life, and I would say, okay, I'll buy it. I'm an alcoholic. If I'm an alcoholic and you got the answer, I've got 4 or 5 other things that are going on in my life. And if I'm an alcoholic and you've got the answer, you ought to be able to make those 4 or 5 things go away. You ought to be able to solve those problems. And I'll be reasonable. I mean, it might take a year. Okay? And I found myself sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, still having the problems that I expected not to have. Now, what I also remember, I told you that I thought recovery was abstinence. The other thing I thought recovery was the absence of problems. Now, I hear it that way. I thought that if you were a good member of the faith that I was brought up in, you didn't sin. I mean, I really thought there were people who had their lives together they taught it like that was the model. So, I just assumed there had to be people who were performing the model. It sounded like that was the way it was. So most of my life, I thought there were this whole group of people who were handling their lives in a way that they didn't have problems. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, as I said, my sponsor didn't seem to have problems. These people owned homes. They had cars, some of them paid for. They had jobs that they had had for 5 to 15 or 20 years. Every area of my life was in instability, and it really seemed to be a different thing. So my hope is that I was going to come in and order my life and not have problems. Now, I had issues in my life that were to become very serious issues for me, and those issues were right there for me in my first year of sobriety, and it didn't bother me at all. I didn't even notice them. My focus was on meetings and recovery and talking with my sponsor. And I really kind of had a period of honeymoon where I really wasn't focused all that much on the circumstances of my life. The problems I had were horrible and they were ordinary. I couldn't get up in the morning. I set the alarm clock for 6:30 and get up at 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock. And I'd go into work, I'd stay for a couple hours, and I'd go out for a 3-hour AA lunch, because anytime, anywhere the hand of AA reached out, I'm supposed to be there, right? Work's not going well. You know how that is. Not sure why that is. I spent more money than I made. I spent about $300 more a month than I made. And if you do that over a long period of time, you'll end up in debt. I just want to report that to you. A lot of you are out there running that experiment. I just want to let you know where that goes. And He had kind of a gambling problem. Well, it was more like a hobby. It was, 3 to 5 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week. It was kind of I was a backgammon player, and I made about $10,000 a year doing that. I thought I needed the income. And I was married, didn't know, my wife started to be very upset with me. I was enormously active in Alcoholics Anonymous and started to wonder if one of the areas I was supposed to practice the program was in our home. I thought that was none of her business. She's supposed to have her focus on her own program. She's not grateful. Here I am sober and doing so well. Everybody thinks I'm very special, and she doesn't think I'm all that special. And so we started to have loud discussions about my activity in Alcoholics Anonymous. She was 21 years old. Why shouldn't she be pleased to spend the rest of her life in Alcoholics Anonymous? We had this group that were 50 to 60 years old, and here I had my 21-year-old bride, and she was willing to spend some of her time, but she just didn't seem sufficiently grateful and open to the opportunity that I was presenting to her. And as time went on in my sobriety, we had 2 young boys, and one of them is here with me this weekend. It was now a Texas transplant. It was a freshman at the University of Austin. And we had 2 sons, and we now have a third who's 7. I have an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 7-year-old, all boys. And I had these 2 boys, and my parents were wonderful parents, really neat, and even wonderful parents make a few mistakes, and I wasn't going to make the few mistakes that my parents made, and I didn't. I made the few they made, and a lot they never thought of. Okay. I was angry and impatient and loud and sometimes physical, and I was having great difficulty. I was as intimidated about being a parent as I've ever been intimidated about anything in my life. I've never been as stretched by the opportunity and experience of being a parent as anything. That really is as big a job as I've ever been faced with in my life. That wasn't going so good. And so I had these areas of my life that weren't going so good, and I want you to know that these were not sometime problems. These were daily problems, okay? These weren't just occasionally. They weren't weekly. They weren't bi-monthly. They weren't monthly or quarterly. These were all the time. And first year, didn't notice them, okay? Second year, noticed them, talked about them, put them on my list, got to be part of my discussion about defects of character. And I started to have, but pretty soon I'm not making as much progress as I think I'm making, so I start to lie and cover up. We go out after the meeting, my checking account's $200 overdrawn, and I buy. Okay, I didn't want to, have you think that maybe it wasn't going okay. Okay, I was the guy who was down there charging $150 or $200 suit, and I'm overdrawn, and I've already got a bill at the clothing store, but, I got to go do that. There's no restriction on that. I'm into, I've got all that kind of behavior going, problems with work and all this kind of stuff. And my life is slowly starting to fall apart, and I'm really trying to handle it, and it's not working. So when I have problems that I don't think I'm supposed to have, and I don't know what to do with them, I started to lie and cover up and build the wall back up. Now, I'm going to 6 and 7 meetings a week in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got all these issues going on, and I start to build the wall back up. So people are asking me, now I got enough issues that I am kind of working on that I can have a real effective conversation with you in AA, and it sounds like I'm really in the game. But what's really going on with me is these 3 or 4 other things that I can't share with you because I'm ashamed of them, and they don't seem to have anything to do with my alcoholism. Second and third year, they bothered me. Fourth and fifth year, they started to eat my lunch. I started to see people I sponsor making more progress than I was making. They started to deplete me. They started to be evidence that I was a poor AA member. They started to be evidence that maybe I am a good starter and a poor finisher, that maybe the solution in your life really isn't going to operate in mine. Maybe this is just one more time where you're just not going to get it. You had a lot of potential, but, potential is just potential. Unless you start to do something with it, this is just one more place, Bob. You're not doing it at work, you're not doing it at home, you're not doing it with your finances, you're just not doing it. Now, the problem that I had is I knew what the answer was. As I started to progress, I had examples of people who had lives that were ordered, and I could use as an example. And what I started to notice as I examined their lives is what they had were principles in operation in their lives. They had the steps in the recovery program. They also had a relationship with the God of their very own understanding. I wanted that relationship, but my problem was this. If I go knock on the door and, God says, who's there? And I say, God is Bob. God's going to say, what do you want? I'm going to say, I want a relationship. I said, I've been running my life. My life's difficult. It isn't working very good, and I want a relationship. God said, that's okay with me. So I said, okay, God, I got these 5 or 6 areas that aren't working in my life. What am I supposed to do? what God's going to say is stop doing them. He's going to say stop gambling, treat your wife good, treat your kids good, don't spend more money than you make, go to work, stay at work, become successful. Now, if I know how to do that, I wouldn't need God. That sounds like a joke, but that is literally what is the sense of developing a relationship with a higher power, of a deep personal relationship with a higher power, when you know you can't fulfill the conditions of the relationship. I was trying as hard as soon as I was going to get rid of that stuff, I was going to have a relationship. That was why I was working on all that stuff. So I could kind of get the tuition together to get a relationship. I really wanted that. I wanted, and I stayed stuck in that position for much longer than 2 or 3 years. Now I'm talking about the problems in my sobriety. My early sobriety was just fine. It was wonderful. You hear someone when they take their first year pin and they thank you for changing their lives and how wonderful it is. They take their second year pin and tell you how sick they were in the first year. I am looking back on my life and sharing with you some perspectives at that. It was increasingly better as I went along, and there was some pain in it. Life has, opportunities, and it has problems, and it has pain in it. It just does. And we have tools and principles and an opportunity and help to deal with that in the quantity, at whatever quantity it gets fired at us. But I'm in that situation, and it is really getting tough for me. And there's no sense in going to God because that's not working. And I am going around and I'm talking with my sponsor about some of this stuff, but he doesn't get it. I am talking to him and I'm saying, this isn't working. They say, oh, God, you look like you're doing a fine job to me, Bob. Just keep it up. I know you got a little problem over there, but it was as if they didn't understand how deep the issue was. Now, I don't think I communicated it as honestly and as openly, number one. And number two, I don't think the problems were as immense as I made them to be. They were debilitating me, and they were problems that many, many people have and bring in. And some of the problems I had, I was viewing myself to the stability of people who were 40 and 45 years old. I was 24 years old. You don't have the maturity when you're 24 years old as someone who does a 40. But I thought I should have had that. All my life I thought I should have what you're supposed to have. I can't go through any process to get it there. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went back into the steps. And I went back and I found out what step 1 meant to me, 6 and 7 years sober. I found out what powerlessness and unmanageability meant to me. I took step 2 at a depth that I had never taken it before. I had believed step 2 corporately. I have never had any doubt that God would restore us to sanity. But I really had stopped believing it for me personally. I got to a point where I just didn't believe God was going to restore Bob Bazan to sanity. He was going to restore us to sanity, but I didn't believe it absolutely without question for me, and I had to go back and make a decision about whether or not I really believe without any hesitation that he was going to restore me to wholeness. And I got into that, and I believed that. I just took a look around, and I noticed everything that was happening around me in the program, and I was not an exemption from that. I was not an exception from that. I took step 3 with my sponsor on my knees in his office. That was embarrassing for me. I had not done that before. It was awkward, and it was important for me. I didn't want to overlook something. I just didn't want to overlook anything. I was just in a terrific amount of pain. Today's step 3 for me is not a step that I take as much as a recognition of a fact. My life is right now, has always been, and will always be in the care of God as I understand Him. Such is the nature of God, and such is the nature of me. I'm an ant on a log going down a river. When it goes around the bend, it has the appearance as if I'm steering it, and I am not steering it. I literally am along for the ride. I am not God in my life. I do not order everything in my life. I can position myself on the log a little bit, not to have such a bad ride, not to get so wet, but I am not in charge of the universe. And I really came to believe that, and I really decided that I was going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I did a 4-step, and I went to my sponsor, and I sat down, and this was the 3rd, 5th step that I had taken, and I was in my 6th year of sobriety, or 7th year. And I went to this man, and I said, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to take my 5th step with you, and I said, I'm in a lot of pain. I said, a lot of pain. And I said, I know it's unnecessary. I know that there's a lot of power around me that I've been unable to avail myself to. And when I'm done with this 5th step, I'm going to do whatever you recommend that I do. So please be careful, okay? This is my life. And I sat down with that man. I took a 5th step, and we talked and cried, and at the end of it, one of the things he wanted me to do was go to an industrial psychologist. And I can't tell you how much I did not want to go to a psychologist. It seemed to me to be an admission of failure of my program. It seemed to me to be prima facie evidence that I wasn't doing something in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went to this psychologist. I mean, he wanted my parents involved. And I said, look, I don't want my parents involved. I don't want my wife involved. I mean, I've been enough of a problem to everybody. My parents, are 60 years old. They have done, 4 times as much as any parent should have to do. If you can't work with me without calling them in, just don't work with me. And we got into it, and I started to get in touch with some stuff that I was able to bring in my program and deal with. And maybe what I had to get in touch with more than anything else, and he did get Linda in the game, is we were in this room one time, I remember when we were discussing it, and what I found out is I was so afraid of failure I couldn't play. That I had spent most of my life so afraid of the consequences of failure I could not put myself at risk. So I had to play a small enough game to succeed. I remember he sat in that room and he said, what is so bad about failure? I mean, I wanted to kill him. I said, what's so bad about failure? I said, he said, what happens to you in failure? I said, what happens to you in failure is you lose everything you have. You go bankrupt, there's a lot of shame in it. It's just, you lose everything. It's like dying. And he said, he looked over at Linda and he said, Linda, if Bob went bankrupt, if Bob failed at everything that he did, he said, would you still be there? And she said, yeah, I'd be there. He said, would the kids be there? And I said, yeah, I'd be there. And all of a sudden, in that conversation, I started to get a sense that I could survive failure. Okay? I'd never had a sense. I mean, I literally had a feeling inside of me that I would die if I ever really had to fully experience failure. And I would even avoid playing not to have to experience that level of failure. And in that conversation, I started to get an idea that I could participate. I started to get an idea that that was what I was asking other people to do when they walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. I was asking them to participate in a way I was not participating in my own life. And that was what wasn't working. There wasn't integrity in that anymore. For a while, I was a participant early on in my sobriety. And then there got to be a time where I was no longer participating in the business that was up on the table for me. At that point in time in my sobriety, and I lost my integrity with respect to my recovery program. It was very painful. And in that conversation, and when I got that back in my program, I was able to become a player again and take the risk and the opportunity that playing would. And I started to, I made a decision that it wasn't optional for me. I just knew that there was enough authority and power in this program that my life was going to change. Not too long after I took the fifth step, and not too long after a couple of those sessions with that psychologist, I was home doing some spiritual reading, and I was in my living room. It had been a lousy day, but one of those days where I hadn't done anything that I wanted to do, and I'd done a whole bunch of things that I hadn't wanted to do. I remember seeing him. What I did was I went down in the afternoon and I played about 6 hours of backgammon. I had won about $500, and I'm home and I'm really depressed. I mean, I am sitting down there. There was a couple of things I was supposed to do. I just started a company about 2 years before. The company is going broke. I mean, I got a partner who I'm lying to about how often I'm working and what's going on. And I'm down there and I win $500. Man, I'm working on stuff that I'm supposed to be handling and I'm not handling it. And I'm in the room and I said, gee, it happened again. And I said, what do you mean it happened again? Weren't you there? And I said, yeah, I was there. But there's so much habit in it, I don't even make a decision anymore. I just go on automatic pilot, and it's like the plane just flies itself, and I wake up later on, and it happened again. And I realized that was a bunch of hooey, that most of the problems in my life were there because I was choosing them to be there, mitigated by habit, but I was regularly choosing them, and as a result of choosing them, I had what I had in my life. My life was exactly the way I was choosing it to be. I complained about my life like it wasn't how I designed it. I mean, I complained, I wish I didn't gamble. I wish I didn't spend too much money. I went through so much, I wish I could work. Baloney. I didn't want to work. Okay? I love gambling. I mean, what held those... I just love gambling. I mean, I was a hell of a backgammon player. I played with some of the best players in the world, And, I mean, what held that in place was a lie. The lie was like I didn't want that. I wanted it so badly, I lied to people around me, I built a protection system around it, and I, day after day after day, chose to have that in my life. Chose. took on great pain, took on great consequences to maintain those stabilities in my life, and as a result of having that, I couldn't get over and have a relationship with the God of my very own understanding to have the growth that I was missing. And I realized that I was hanging on to these things, and until I let go of them, I wasn't going to go anyplace. And that night, just out of pain and just out of fear, I got down on my knees and I was allowed the opportunity. I realized that I had tried as hard as I knew how to try to get rid of those defects of character, and I'd failed. Just flat failed. And at that moment, I was allowed the opportunity to take the 6th and the 7th step with the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. The 6th step says that we were entirely ready to have God remove our defects of character, and the 7th step simply humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Now, I had spent 7 years trying to get rid of my defects of character. I submit to you and to myself that you go about the process of getting rid of your defects of character differently than you go about the process of getting entirely ready to have God remove them. If I had enough power and muscle and authority to get rid of my defects of character, I wouldn't need the program and I wouldn't need God. I do not have that power in my life. You know how we change in Alcoholics Anonymous? A doctor doesn't heal. He creates an aseptic environment, creates an atmosphere in which healing can take place, and God heals. A farmer doesn't grow. He creates an atmosphere in which growth can take place, plants a seed, and God grows. And we don't change. We create an atmosphere in which change can take place, and God changes us. It is the atmosphere and the attitude involved in the 6th and the 7th step, and the 3 requirements of being honest, open-minded, and being willing. Now, when I came to you, I surrendered my life. I surrendered my alcoholism. I took step 1 with my alcoholism. I gave you everything that I thought directly related to my alcoholism. I never took another drink from the 10th of December, 1967. What I didn't put in that, and I didn't know to put in it, and as I had the opportunity to learn it as I went on, I didn't take the opportunity. I didn't put in my sex life. I didn't put in my finances. I didn't put in my marriage. I didn't put in my job. I didn't know to put those in. I just didn't know. And in my sobriety, I thought I was handling my recovery. I thought I was 6 years sober. I mean, AA works. I'm 6 years sober. But I got these other problems, and they don't have to, they're work problems. I dealt with, you know why all my efforts didn't work on the problems? Because they weren't the problems. They were the symptoms. Do you know why all the work on drinking didn't work? Because drinking, as Clancy said, was not the problem. Drinking was the symptom. Now, a money problem doesn't have to do with money. I spent more than I made when I made $12,000 a year, and I spent more than I made when I made $25,000 a year. Gambling was part of how I did what I did for excitement. That's part of what I did to make myself feel good. I was working on the end of the pipe the water was coming out on. At some point, I was. I had my hand over the damn pipe and water spurting all over the pipe. And I'm trying as hard as I know to keep the water in the pipe. And that night, out of fear, I got down on my knees and I became entirely ready to have God remove my defects of character, and 5 of the major problems I was struggling with in my life fell off of me. Now, I had to cooperate with them. One of the problems I have not solved in my life is my weight. I weigh more than I'd like to weigh. I weigh 210, 215 pounds. And that's about 30 pounds more than I'd like to weigh. Okay. Now, I spent more money than I made. I eat more calories than I consume. Okay. Now, regularly today, when I go to deal with my weight, when I go on a diet, the first thing I do when I go on a diet is eat about 3 times as much during the day to prepare for the diet. I God, tomorrow I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to go get, the hell with it. Breakfast I already ate too much for breakfast. I got that. And so I have that mentality. I have that today. I have it daily. I do not deal effectively with that, so I still have that mindset that I have with that. But it seems to me that the moment that I make a decision that I'm really going to try to alter how I am with food is I have a decision to find out if that's just a complaint or it's really a piece of business. And for the longest time lately, it's just been a complaint. Because every time I get it on the thing, it is not a piece of business. It just isn't a piece of business, because the very next time I get an opportunity to find out if I'm serious about it, almost within an hour of when I say I'm going to do it, and regularly I don't do it. That day on my knees, when I made that decision, I was serious. I hired someone to get me up in the morning. I found out that I never missed a plane. I never missed a trip. All I missed was work. I mean, I just missed work. I wasn't, just missed work. I found out I wouldn't get up for me. So I went to someone who I would get up for. And I said, would you call me? And for 2 years, I always do things in moderation. For 2 years, I got called at 5:30 in the morning. I always, never in moderation. You got to do it to excess. I gave my wife the finances. I found out, she could pay half a bill. Damnedest thing I have ever seen in my life. I never occurred to me you could pay a third of a bill. She'd break it up in pieces. I didn't want anybody to know I didn't have the money, So I'd give her our finances, and she managed our household finances into stability, something that I couldn't do because I had an extension and a relationship with my ego and money, then I wasn't able to do that. I didn't have enough integrity and honesty with respect to money. Still have some issues with that, but I've become relatively successful thanks to you, and some of those problems I just don't notice anymore. I had problems, in our relationship, so I started to date my wife. I made a decision to date my wife. I didn't want to date my wife. I had her love and affection. It was the rest of yours of love and affection that I wanted. I kind of took hers for granted. And every Friday night I started to date my wife, and I've done that for, 14 years. That's become one of the most important things in our relationship. When I'm gone on Friday nights, now we go out some other night. That has just become, that's one of our nights. That is she knows, without question, she's got my undivided attention at least one night during the week. She can store up all that stuff that she's been meaning to tell me, and we go on out. No one else goes out with us. That's usually a romantic night. It's a very special night, and we go out. We started out, we didn't have a hell of a lot of money. We went out to a Mexican restaurant, and we were spending about $6 or $7, $8 in the night, but that was about as important a thing as I've ever done for my marital relationship. And today, the issue is whether we have trouble keeping it down. So we go out maybe and do that twice a week. Okay, that's been an important part. So I started to order my life and start to participate. I all the time knew. What's one of the great privileges of sponsoring people is you sit down with them, they always have their answer. If you could sit down with someone who's telling you that their life is a catastrophe, if you can quiet them down long enough and say, be quiet for a minute, close your eyes, and I pretend I just came into a room and told you what you just told me, brought the problem that you brought to me into the room. Now tell me the solution. I have just about never had anybody who couldn't tell me their own solution. So the problem isn't that we're missing any knowledge. We act as if we're missing knowledge. What we're missing is power. Chamberlain one time had a chance to go on down and talk at an alcoholism conference. Chamberlain didn't do very many things that were outside of the program. He had a chance to go on down and talk to a conference that was kind of a mixture of professionals and a mixture of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he went down there and talked. And I remember someone asked him when he came back what he thought of that. And he said they don't seem to know very much about surrender. And that is the power of our program. The power of our program is our own weakness. The power of our program is the admission that we are powerless and cannot manage our own lives. When I came to you, I wanted an expert on me, and I surrendered, and then I became an alcoholic, and I wanted an expert on how to recover from alcoholism, and I had teachers, and I was teachable. During the middle period of my sobriety, I started to have issues in my life, and I became an individual again, and I became separate. My problem didn't become alcoholism, it again became Bob. And I started to want expert. I said, can't you see? My life's falling apart. I'm going to 5 meetings with you people. I live my life with you daily. My life is turning into a river of crap, and you interact with me like it's okay. Can't you see it's falling apart? Don't you notice? And there isn't the same, a new person can walk in tonight, and be having a love affair with a zebra, and 2 other guys will get them a cup of coffee and tell them they too are having a love affair with a zebra, but you start having those kind of issues when you're sober 10 years and people look at you funny. They don't treat you the same way. There isn't the level of acceptance and understanding. And I don't say this as promotion of poor behavior. I just say it as a fact. Today in my program, I need people in my life who have that kind of non-judgmental love and understanding and support for me to take the risks that it seemed to me that every time I get in front of something I don't know how to handle, it sure seems dangerous and risky. And I need the same sort of love and support, but I have to maintain relationships to have those relationships available to me. That's one of my jobs today. I want to maintain enough integrity in my life today. Today, I have no question in my mind whether or not the program is big enough to handle my life. It is. The program, the good news for us, the bad news when we come in is we've got a disease called alcoholism. The good news is in order to recover from alcoholism, you got to learn how to live. Do you know what a privilege that is? Do you know what a privilege it has been for me to have you teach me how to live? I came to you at 23 years of age with every area of my life dysfunctional. Today, I'm happily married and in love with my wife. Today, I am a father in normal terms. I'm a functional father. I am no longer a dysfunctional parent. I love my children and I do it very imperfectly, but I'm in that game and I'm a participant in that game. I'm self-supporting through my own contributions. Okay. And my life is pretty damn much as it appears to be. As I stand before you, it is pretty damn much as it appears to be. Now, I did not know how to bring that about in my own life. I did not have the power to bring that about in my own life. I have spent my life with you. You and the program have ordered my life. Now, we talk a lot about, there's so much confusion going on today. There's so many different programs going on today. There's, all this ACA stuff and all the different programs that are, impinging. And it's more confusing today. It isn't as simple today. But one of the problems I think that we have today is we have lost some of the respect for the disease of alcoholism. How profound it is. Clancy talks about most people die today from the disease of alcoholism. I have spent over 20 years with you. I'm almost 20 years sober. I tend to assume when someone's got alcoholism, they get sober. And that is not so. It just isn't so. When people get alcoholism, they tend to die. And about 1 out of every 10 get to Alcoholics Anonymous, and only about half the people that get to Alcoholics Anonymous stay and recover. This is like a gift. And it isn't just that you stop doing the damaging things. In order to stop to do the damaging things, you have to learn how to live in serenity, in peace, in prosperity, in normalcy. That's available. That's a promise. It is. That is not available. It is there is just too much evidence that if you come here and interact with the program and put yourself in that game, that's just going to happen. There are universal spiritual principles in operation that transform lives. And we sit there, we listen to a guy like Tom Ivester, we listen to Clancy, we listen to Mary Ann, we listen to stories that stretch the imagination. And we sit in chairs in the middle of our sobriety, sober 4 and 5 years, and wonder if the program can work on marriages. Wonder if it can solve financial problems. Wonder if it can help us be a student. It's just silly. It changes lives in ways that are just so profound, it's just silly. Now, the disease of alcoholism is an enormously powerful, treacherous disease. It is in its active stages, and I say it is in sobriety. My alcoholism is present in my sobriety. I am treating it, and as a result of my treating it, does not have the devastating negative effects daily, but I am still dealing and interacting with my alcoholism. That's why I'm an active member of AA. Not for a drinking problem I had 20 years ago, but for a living problem I have today. I still have those same fears. I still have that conversation. I still am afraid to fail. I still want to throw my kids through windows. I still want to spend more money than I make. I still want to yell at my wife. I don't do that as often. I get those initial reactions. I still have the same identical initial reactions I had in my drinking. I just don't act on them. And I don't act on it today because you've given me a choice. And I want to have the same integrity that when I'm sponsoring someone today in the first year of sobriety, and I want to say, come in with us. Try the things that we have in the program, and your life will transform. I want to be, the platform from which I want to be able to say that from is that is how I live my life today. So I have problems in my life today. Am I living the program with the same sort of excitement, with the same sort of expectation? In 20 years of sobriety, am I still in the game in a way that when I look someone in the eyes, and say, come on in and try it, it works. That I can say that from a position that I am still in that process, using those principles, using those steps to deal with what's going on in my life today. As a result of that experience that I had 14 years or 13 years ago, I am in that game. I don't own that territory, but I rent it and live in it more regularly than I ever have in my life. And when I say that to you, that is pretty much the way it is. If we had more respect for the disease in drinking and the disease that it appears in our life, there isn't anybody in this room that has been sober for a while that doesn't have issues, serious issues, that we could need the program as much to order our lives today as we did when we walked in. And I think if that focus, if we realize how active alcoholism is through our lives, and what an opportunity working on it is, there wouldn't be any attraction for these other things that confuse us. They just wouldn't be attractive at all. I mean, there's too much here. I mean, there is too much in recovery. There is too much in our program. Our program, it changes lives. I mean, where the hell, if we ever stop doing what we do, there isn't any other place this happens. You can't go anyplace else and get what we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. They can treat the disease lots of places. God bless them. They decided to do what Bill Wilson decided not to do. And they do it well. We used to bring drunks to hospitals and complain you couldn't bring them any place. Now we can bring them places, and we complain you can bring them places. You know, I mean, I'm curious about that. I'm in a state where we got 3,500 beds for the treatment of alcoholism, and they do a hell of a good job. I mean, they just do. You know who doesn't always do a hell of a good job is us when we get them. I mean, if we really want to look at an opportunity, let's look at the opportunity of what we do with newcomers when they come. There's a hell of a lot of things we're not doing in our own medium. We want to take someone's inventory. Let's take our inventory. I mean, we do some things amazingly well, but the truth is if we are going to engage in examining what other people are doing wrong, I mean, happiness is knowing who to blame. I mean, if you really want sweet happiness, find someone to blame. We have so many things we are not doing in our own lives, in our own program. I mean, the fact that I may not from time to time practice the program so well may be that when I'm sponsoring someone, I'm not a good enough example to get them in the game. When I'm a little tired or I'm not making that call or I want to go home and I'm not going to talk to that person means that I am not participating in fulfilling my responsibility in our own program. We will never die. There's just too much going on here if we just do our own business. If we just continue eyeball to eyeball to work with other alcoholics and to keep the program intact and keep its integrity, there's just too much going on. We will never die. No one else can do what we do. Everybody treats it, but there's only one place to go to recover, and this is it. If we were on a spaceship, and we're going to everybody in this room is going to take a journey to the nearest star. The nearest star is Alpha Centauri, approximately is about 8 million light years away. And if we got in a spaceship and left to that star and went 100,000 miles an hour, it'd take 300 years to get there and 300 years to get back. When we got in that spaceship, everybody in this room would know who they were, where they had come from, where they were going, and why they were going there. But it isn't very hard to understand that if we didn't very carefully pass that information down, unchanged and intact, from generation to generation, that 200 years from now you could have a spaceship just chock full of people who were lost in space. Now the message of who we are and where we have come from is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, they still had people who were direct links from our founders, handed me that book intact, unchanged, with integrity. Passed it through their own lives, shared their lives with me, gave me the opportunity to participate and to transform my lives. My job today is to take the message that's in that book, pass it through my lives, take it from the people. You know, sometimes Clancy said, like we're the new generation of leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous. The only reason we can see clearly is we're standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us. One of the reasons I think I have benefited so much in my recovery is I have had great teachers. One of the reasons I love Texas so much is Bob White was one of my mentors. Now, I had men and women who shared their lives, and it was a privilege to observe their lives. That's why I like being with Ivester. It's a privilege to observe his life. I have men like that available to me that some of our earlier members didn't have available to them, and they were making it up as they went. I don't have to make it up as much because I've got men and women who were big, strong horses who had a pretty good intact program when I came here and shared it with me and helped me change my life. So I want to take that message unchanged, pass it through my life, and have it available so that 20 years from now when someone walks into a meeting like this, there isn't a whole bunch of people in a room who don't know who they are, where they have come from, where they are going, or why. Thank you.